on to round 2, because pro camera tip, guys, you actually need to turn the camera on in order for it to record. Being stuck inside all day during this apocalypse really, really does suck. But, as I said yesterday, where I see struggle, I see opportunity. And so I've compiled a list of the 10 books to help you beat cabin fever today. Because hopefully these books will challenge the way you see some pretty fundamental things in your life, and that is what I'm here for, because hey guys, I'm Showman, I want to challenge the way you think, and today I want to help you beat cabin fever with my list of 10 books that have changed my life and hopefully will change yours too, should you let them. Starting off with number 1, and that is Animal Crossing, the new one. Because guys, this is literally what my newsfeed on Instagram has become. Every single story that I see, everybody seems to be playing Animal Crossing, and so I had to include it on my list. There was no other choice. But moving on to number 2, which is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Now, this book challenges the way you see money, the way you see assets, and the way you see liabilities. And I think it's a really good introduction to the world of wealth and wealth building if you haven't been exposed to it. Robert Kiyosaki, who had a rich dad and a poor dad, tells his story on how the traditional view of money and of wealth building did not get him and his family very far. And then he contrasts this with his other father, his friend's father, who is a successful businessman, kind of giving you the context of maybe the way you're living your life and the way you're setting your goals might not be the most optimal way. Guys, if you're gonna read one book on this list, let it be this one. This is a really fundamental book for you to understand in order for you to move forward as a functioning adult. Number 3, and this is likely the most influential book ever. This snapped me out of my conventional way of thinking of how a career should or should not look like. Because traditionally, I looked at the career as having 40 hours in a week on a job, and you get your salary, and you go in, you clock in, you do your job, and you clock out, and then you go on the weekend, and yay, it's the weekend. However, this book, The 4-Hour Workweek, challenged that completely. It said that as long as you're creative and as long as you're willing to put in the upfront work, you can do as much or as little work as you can. Now, this book may be a little bit outdated in terms of how to actually achieve that. However, the idea is still there. The idea that all of this is possible and that you can do basically whatever you want and you don't have to follow a traditional path is there. Now, I know this might not be super out there stuff, but I find so many people still are stuck in this kind of old, almost outdated way of living life. Number 4 is a book that isn't really meant as a starter book. This is more meant as the sequel to the second or third books that I mentioned, or if you've read any other business books, and that is 0 to 1, because this is a book on possibility, and it's a book on getting started and taking your first step, because as it highlights, going from 0 to 1 is the hardest step in any business, in any endeavor, in basically anything in life. Getting that first piece on the board is the hardest step. Getting your first video out there is the hardest step. Your first 100 subscribers is the hardest step. And so reading this book will kind of shed a light of possibility onto you and onto kind of the way you view business, the way you view entrepreneurship. And especially if you're an entrepreneur, this is a must read. Moving away from business and more into personal life, we have the charisma myth. Now guys, so many people think that how charismatic they are basically just depends on their genetics. It is almost completely independent from it. If you're uncharismatic, you can change it. I'm a testament to it. I used to be just the worst. Ask anyone in my high school, I was the shy, awkward, weird kid. Whereas now I'm significantly more confident, I'm significantly less shy, and more importantly, I'm significantly more persuasive because your level of charisma does have a lot to do with how persuasive you are. And no matter what you want to do in life, you kinda need to be persuasive because unless you can do everything by yourself, you eventually need to convince someone of something, and therefore you need to be as charismatic as possible. The next book in line with the charisma myth is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Hoot, because this book is probably one of the best introductory self-help books ever. If you're reading one self-help book, this is probably the one, because the author, Mark Manson, is brilliant at challenging the way you've lived your life. This has been another game-changing book. This, along with The 4-Hour Workweek, are probably two of my all-time most influential books, because this taught me how to essentially not give a damn about things. So guys, if you're gonna read two books on this list, let this be the second one, because I promise you, unless you've heard these things before, this will help. So this next book, I've debated whether or not I actually want to put on this list, because it's kind of an out there book, but it's also very polarizing. It's very, you either love it or you hate it kind of book, and that is The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. Now, the reason Ayn Rand wrote this book is because this is the ideal man of her dreams, and boy, did she get it right, but is it hard to understand what she actually meant. This book is possibly the holy grail for masculinity, especially in the modern world, because Howard Rourke, the main character, isn't your standard manly man, the guy who like hammers and saws things and drinks a lot of beer. No, this guy is an architect. He just wants to design and build houses. He's not what you think a man should be, but he is the man. However, it is hard to understand. After I read this, it actually took me about 2 months of gestation to really understand what she was trying to go for and what she thought the ideal guy is. And so if you are going to read this, I really want you to keep an open mind, because this is not an easy book, not just because it's super long, but because it does put some thoughts out there that might not be the most comfortable for the general people to read. Now, if you're a girl watching this, I still think you should read this book, because this isn't just the ideal man. I actually think this is almost the ideal person that people should at least somewhat try to imitate, but at the very least, understand that it is a possibility. Nearing the end of this, we're gonna go way back in time with Sapiens. This is the brief history of how we came to be, how we evolved to be the way we evolved. Understanding where we came from is paramount to seeing where we ended up. And so this is a history book, but it is a history book that is well worth reading. And it's not your average history book. He actually makes some really wild claims, which I think are super funny, but if you actually pay attention to it, can be very profound. At the same time, you don't have to 100% agree with all of his opinions, because some of it, like how grain cultivated us versus us cultivating grain, though it makes sense, it's a little bit wacky, and I think he just did that to more or less be out there. However, you by no means need to agree with all of his opinions. Some of them are really out there, but it's still definitely worth a read to see where we came from, so that we can function with a better appreciation of who we are today. Before we continue to the final two books, I just wanted to say thank you so much for making it this far. And if you're liking this list so far, please let me know in the comments down below. And also let me know if I missed any books. Is there a book that you think that everyone should read that would really challenge the way they look at a particular thing? It doesn't have to be in any of the topics that I mentioned here in this list. It can be whatever you think. I want to know your opinion. So, book number 9, this is the most out there book on this list, and that is The Power of Now. Out of all the books on this list, this is the one you have to keep the most open mind for, because Eckhart Tolle, or Eckhart Tolle, I'm not 100% sure, is an enlightened person. What he talks about is very highly spiritual, but it's spirituality that everybody could benefit from. We all live in the past and in the future, and we never live in the now, and therefore we are so anxious and sad and just not as happy as we could be. And so he talks a lot about the ego, what it is, how to crush it, what pain bodies are, all of these kind of out there ideas, but it is well worth reading because he is just such a wise person. This is kind of what I meant by spirituality. It's so important that nowadays we talk about the ego, or the ego as he talks about in The Power of Now, because that is holding us back so much from advancing as individuals, from advancing as a society, and from advancing as the human culture as a whole. And so this is a very paramount book that I think everybody should read. And the last one, I wanted to leave this off with The Black Prism, one of my all-time favorite fantasy series. Now you're probably saying, whoa, Shoma, like all the books so far have been like Sapiens, and A Subtle Art of Not Giving a Hoot, and The Power of Now, all of these like big books. This is a fantasy book. Why do I need to read this? And that is because I don't think people are reading enough fantasy. People are so grounded in the world as it is that they're not even considering what the world could potentially be, of what other things could potentially look like. And so I think you're really limiting yourself with the way you actually view the world. And also the way he deals with the characters, I think, is really powerful. I actually learned so much from the characters in this book because they are so well written. So yes, it's set in a high fantasy world, but I think that is just an opportunity for us to expand our minds and think of the things that are not grounded in this world, and therefore freeing up ourselves just a little bit. And so we've reached the end of my list. Let me know what I've missed. Let me know what books I should be including, because I'm always looking for more book recommendations. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Did I record it this time? I did. Good.